Hi there. We're in day 103 of our Through the New Testament in 1 year. And today we are starting Luke chapter 12. Short studies, so this shouldn't take long. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. Big subject, right? In the meantime, when so many thousands of the people had gathered together that they were trampling one another, he began to say to his disciples first, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. Right? And this is a famous verse. Nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Therefore, whatever you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light, and whatever you have whispered in private rooms shall be proclaimed on the housetops. A lot of people fear that, right? Have no fear. I tell you, my friends, do not fear those who kill the body, and after that have nothing more that they can do. But I will warn you whom to fear. Fear him who, after he has killed, has authority to cast into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him, God, right? Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten before God? Why, even the hairs of all of your head are numbered. Fear not. You are more valuable than many sparrows, right? Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, right? Wish I have to look that up, huh? Acknowledge Christ before men. And I tell you, everyone who acknowledges me before men, the Son of Man will also acknowledge before the angels of God. Got that? But the one who denies me before men will be denied before the angels of God, and everyone who speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven. But the one who blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven. Okay? We talked about this yesterday when the Pharisees did just that, okay? That is giving Satan credit for something the Holy Spirit is doing, okay? And they accused Jesus of that when he was casting out demons. They said he was casting out demons by Beelzebul, which is blaspheming the Holy Spirit, okay? Can we do that now? There's, you could say the words, but Jesus isn't here physically in his mortal presence to do that. So a lot of people think this can't be done nowadays, but I can't imagine attributing to Satan anything that is the Holy Spirit's. And when they bring you before the synagogues and the rulers and the authorities, I love this part right here. Do not be anxious about how you should defend yourself or what you should say, for the Holy Spirit will teach you in that very hour what you ought to say. Okay? I have experienced this. Okay? If you're in the Holy Spirit, he will give you the words when you need them. Hey, the parable of the rich fool. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. There I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Treasures in heaven, right? Don't be anxious. And he said to his disciples, Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouses nor barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more value are you than the birds? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? Right? Worrying, right? If you are not able to do a small thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Consider the lilies. It's the only flower he ever mentioned, the lilies, right? How they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Right? But if God so clothes the grass which is alive in the field today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. Right. If you seek God's kingdom only, all these things will be added unto you. What you should eat, what you should drink, what you should wear. You shouldn't worry about that stuff. Okay? A lot of people do. And it takes up their whole life. Right? Now let's, for the kick, so let's take this and copy this. And let's go over here and we will do a search. I'm looking for the gotquestions.org, a Bible thinker. Here it is. I love this site, gotquestions.org. What is the leaven of the Pharisees? Answer, Jesus spoke of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, right? As in many of his teaching, Jesus used the everyday item, in the case leaven or yeast, to demonstrate the spiritual truth. Jesus refers to the yeast of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. Jesus points out that the teachings of the Pharisees were pervasive and produced unbelief, right? When the disciples heard Jesus comment about the leaven of the Pharisees, they were quick to jump to a wrong conclusion. It is because we did not bring any bread, they said among themselves. Jesus reminded them of the two miracles of the feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000, right? And emphasized they did not need to worry about food. Jesus was not speaking of physical leaven. Jesus had done many miracles, yet the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Herodians, mentioned in Mark 8:15, still did not believe him. Shortly before Jesus warned his disciples of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees came to Jesus and tested him by asking him to show him a sign from heaven. Jesus had refused to give them a sign, but promised them a sign of Jonah. And we read that yesterday, right? As only evidence to come. This exchange gives significant context to Jesus' mention of leaven. The yeast or leaven of the Pharisees was the subtle yet pervasive influence the Pharisees extort over people. Those who follow the Pharisees might demand signs, but they would gradually increase in unbelief until they had hardened their hearts, just like the Pharisees. Right? The man-made teachings of the Pharisees, and it still goes on today, right, were as pervasive as yeast in a loaf of bread. Their corruption advanced in hardly perceptible ways, but it was extensive. Jesus denounced the Pharisees on several occasions, and their hypocrisy was a common theme. The Pharisees displayed an outward conformity to the law, but in their hearts were full of unbelief and sinfulness. By warning people against the hypocrisy or leaven of the Pharisees, Jesus sought to keep his followers from an insidious influence that would undermine faith and corrupt their walk with God. Believers today should heed the same warning from the Lord and guard against Pharisaic attitudes. Parasitic, not too far off, isn't it? And the temptation to take pride in man-made teachings and traditions. Once a bit of Pharisaicism, is introduced in the church, it can quickly spread. There you go. All of the pomp and circumstance, right? Beware of the pomp and circumstance. Churches, very large churches, they wear fancy robes and clothes and sit on gold chairs and right, do as I say, not as I do, kind of thing. You can get caught up in that, okay? That's why even in Revelations, they talk about the big churches, and I have this fault with you, and I always says, I have this fault with you, right? The only one he had no fault with was a little tiny church with just a few people striving only to get closer to God, right? That's what you should do. So there you go. That's half of Mark 12. Maybe half. Sometimes they stretch it out. Okay, tomorrow we'll finish that. What's the next day? And then on to 13. So that's the first half of 12. Interesting stuff, leaven of the Pharisees, yeast of the Pharisees. It still goes on today, right? Big, fancy churches that are cold and dead inside. And they only do circumstance and do as we say. And there's even some religions, very large ones, right? Take over entire countries that don't read the Bible. Read only what we tell you to read, okay? read the Bible. Okay, read the Bible. Multiple translations of the Bible. Okay, you can have 4 or 5 different Bibles and put them all together. You will get a good idea what it says. And I mean, if you want to learn Greek and Hebrew, you can read original. Okay, I'm getting older, but I wouldn't mind being able to go into the original Hebrew and get your own idea. But there's lots of good versions out there. So there you go. That's day 103. And we'll continue this tomorrow. Catch up on anything I missed. And tomorrow we'll continue. See you then.